Now, on Thursday, there were some alleged reports of an attack on 2 oil tankers in the Gulf of Oman. Now, immediately following that, the news of that coming out, the U.S. immediately pointed their fingers at the country of Iran. Now, in fact, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said this, quote, "The assessment," which is, Iran basically being, blamed for these attacks. The assessment, they said, is based on intelligence, the weapons used, the level of expertise needed to execute the operation, recent similar Iranian attacks on shipping, the fact that no proxy group operating in the area has the resources and proficiency to act with such a high degree of sophistication. Now, Pompeo, by the way, did not actually cite any details on the evidence, despite saying all of this and saying, look, it's Iran, it's Iran. Look at all the details, except that I have no details. Now, he also asserted that Iran was behind a litany of attacks prior to Thursday's tanker incident. Once again, he did that without providing any sort of evidence. Now, Pompeo said, quote, "Taken as a whole, these unprovoked attacks present a clear threat to international peace and security." Now, you know what actually presents a clear threat to international peace and security? Mike Pompeo. This is how it starts, man. Now, again, let me ask you a question, right? Iran. Why would Iran endanger itself by attacking ships in the Gulf of Oman? Does that make any sense? Where a country that doesn't want to get into a war with the United States would start provoking the United States into a war. That would be disastrous for both Iran and the United States. I mean, sure, you could say, well, it'd be disastrous for the United States. Yeah, but it'd also be disastrous for Iran. Look at what happened in Iraq. Look at what happened in Libya. Look at what happens everywhere the United States gets into a war. It's a disaster for literally both sides. But there are, of course, people that make a lot of money, and that's the defense contractors, and that's oil companies, which, of course, Iran has a lot of oil. And I think that's probably what this is about. Iranian leaders, they're not stupid. I want to be clear. I have no love for the mullahs. I despise the mullahs. I despise the fundamentalist government of Iran. But they're not dumb enough to start a war with the United States. They're just not. They're just not. But defense contractors and people like Mike Pompeo, they are stupid enough to attack Iran. Which, as I mentioned before, this would be an unmitigated disaster. Now, following this farce of a press conference, anti-war groups went after Pompeo. They said this, and this is John Rainwater, Executive Director of Peace Action. Quote, "Mike Pompeo has zero credibility when it comes to Iran. He has long been actively campaigning for a confrontation with Iran. He has a track record of pushing bogus theories with no evidence, such as the idea that Iran collaborates closely with Al-Qaeda." Now, to people who don't know the situation, they might be like, oh my God, Iran working with Al-Qaeda. Oh, that's horrible. That's horrifying. I'm scared. But in reality, that's nonsense. Iran, for example, is majority Shia Muslim. Al-Qaeda is a Sunni group. Now, why does that matter? Well, those two sides just happen to despise each other. They hate each other. The idea that they would work closely together is absolute nonsense. But see, Pompeo doesn't care. Why? It's because Pompeo wants war. And unfortunately, that's all these people want, is a conflict with Iran. Now, let me go to another quote here from Rainwater. He said, quote, "Once again, Pompeo's not waiting for the evidence to come in. He's picking facts to suit his campaign for confrontation with Iran." I think that's fairly clear. Medea Benjamin, co-founder of Code Pink, said this speech is, quote, "deja vu," and she compared it to former Secretary of State Colin Powell's weapons of mass destruction speech before the UN back in 2003. I think that is fairly accurate. In fact, she says, quote, "Secretary Pompeo gets zero proof, but insists that Iran is responsible for ship attacks in the Gulf of Oman this morning. Lies, lies, and more lies to make a case for war. Let's not be fooled into another disastrous war. And believe me, as I keep saying, it would be a complete and utter disaster that would make Iraq look tame in comparison. And Iraq, of course, is this century's, I think, biggest debacle. Now, in a column following Pompeo's speech, there's more criticism here. Esquire's Charles Pierce writes this, quote, I remember the Iraq lies. I know this administration is truthless from top to bottom and all the way out both sides. I don't trust the Saudi government as far as I can throw a bone saw, which, by the way, the Saudi government are Sunnis, right? They also hate Iran. They hate the Shia. And so we are allies with the Saudis. And so we are enemies of Iran. And so if we invade Iran, that's great for Saudi Arabia, by the way. Now, Saudi Arabia, again, wants us to attack Iran because they want to get more powerful in the region. Now, he continues, Pierce does, by saying, and this president feels very much like he's being run to ground at the moment and needs a distraction. That's the scary part. More of his quote. His Secretary of State is a third-rate Congress critter from Kansas who once advised American soldiers to disobey lawful orders and who's fighting way above his weight class. Also, too, John Bolton is 8 kinds of maniac. And believe me, I have talked about John Bolton, what he really believes. You go back, subscribe for one. You can go back and look at some of those videos where I talk about just the kind of crazy stuff John Bolton believes. And it's real scary. It's end time stuff. So, and of course, war in the Middle East plays right into some of those beliefs. Now, on Twitter, the criticism does not end here. Trita Parsi, founder of the National Iranian American Council, echoed Pierce, writing, quote, a serial liar is president, a warmonger and serial fabricator who helped get us into a disastrous Iraq war, and who has sabotaged numerous attempts at diplomacy is the National Security Advisor. But go-ahead media treat Pompeo's accusations as evidence. Now, that's also super important because what does the media say? The media is treating this and Pompeo as all sorts of serious. You're Iran. Oh, here's Iran starting stuff again. Oh, man, they might have attacked these tankers. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Oh, do you hear that? That's the drum beats of war. They're starting once again. As far as I'm concerned, to me, right now, was what I've seen, and I get that I don't have all the evidence, but from what I've seen, and from knowing Pompeo and Bolton, the neoconservatives from all the way back in the Bush administration, this looks like a Gulf of Tonkin moment. And that is not good. It does not make sense for Iran to attack tankers and to invite a disastrous war with the United States. In fact, war is not in their best interest. Why do you think that they actually signed the Iran deal, which allowed inspectors to do invasive inspections into their nuclear program, where they gave up? They didn't even have nuclear weapons. They gave up pretty much their nuclear energy program in order to avoid war with the United States. And what did Trump do when he got into office? He ripped it up. He ripped it up. Why? Because he wants war with Iran. That's scary, man. And it makes a lot of sense that an administration that is right now flailing, filled with neocons, backed by defense contractors, and all that, it makes sense that they would love another war in the Middle East to get fat off of. Hands off Iran, man. Like, we cannot allow our leaders to get us into another disastrous war. We've got to get up and we've got to... Look, this doesn't mean you're defending Iran or the mullahs or agree with them. It just means that we should not invade another country, that we should not get into another war, that we should examine all the evidence and be incredibly skeptical of anything John Bolton, Donald Trump, or any of the other neocons in the administration and the government try to sell us, because they've sold us a war before, a phony war that turned out to be a disaster, and like hell they're going to try to sell us another one. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know how I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent, progressive media.